Hi there, it's Tara with the Cedar Rapids Public Library, and today I will be talking to you about reading woke for babies and children. So I'd like to start out by introducing you to the Read Woke movement, as well as what makes a book read woke. So Read Woke books do the following. They challenge social norms. They give voice to the voiceless. They provide information about a group that has been traditionally disenfranchised. They seek to challenge the status quo, and Read Woke books contain a protagonist from an underrepresented or oppressed group. So why should we be reading woke to our children, and even our very young children, such as babies and toddlers? Well, several studies have shown that babies as young as 5 months old are already able to distinguish among faces of all races equally well. So they're seeing race already at that age. And then by 9 months, babies are reacting even more swiftly to their own race than to others that they may not be familiar with. A study done in May by the University of Massachusetts Amherst showed that younger infants are only using the frontal part of their brain for differentiating, but by 9 months, those babies are also using their occipital temporal region, which is the same region that adults use for racial differentiation. So all this to say that babies know that race exists, and so we should be helping them make positive associations early on and exposing them to diversity and different faces early on. And what better way of accomplishing these goals than reading woke to our children and babies? And we also want to highlight that part of reading woke is showing people with different abilities and showing books that have underrepresented voices. So let's talk about some books. And we'll start with Read Woke books that are great to read for babies and toddlers. And I've highlighted a few for you here. This Little Trailblazer is a colorful board book written by Joan Holub. It features simple biographies of several women that are written in rhyming text. And some of the women included are Rosa Parks, Ada Lovelace, and Maria Tallchief. And then Think Big Little One is a board book that's very similar to this Little Trailblazer. But Think Big Little One is written by author Vashti Harrison. And it also features simple biographies of women that highlight diversity. I really loved the illustrations. They're realistic and beautiful. And people featured in this book include Sister Rosetta Tharpe, as well as Frida Kahlo. And finally, Brown Baby Lullaby. This is a picture book written by Tamika Brown. It portrays a day in the life of a family. The storyline is simple but very sweet, and the colors used in the illustrations are warm. And this would be a great book for a bedtime story. So in the next slide, I'll be introducing some picture books that are great for older toddlers as well as preschoolers. But before we get to that, let's talk about what happens when toddlers begin to develop language abilities. So we know that toddlers, as they develop language, will begin to be more vocal in talking about racial differences such as skin color. We can always reply to them in a calm tone, reinforcing that we know that these differences exist, but also we want to highlight the wonderfulness that racial diversity brings to our society and tie that back into the books that we're reading. And then with preschoolers, it's common for kids to apply positive traits to people of their own group, but maybe not to people in other ethnic groups. So we need to talk to them and address those things as they come up and remind them of the positiveness that is in all of us, but also the positive things that we notice in people who are different from us. And that difference isn't necessarily bad, that it can be a good thing. All right, let's talk about some awesome Read Woke picture books. So starting top left with Hair Love by Matthew Cherry. I loved this book. It features a daddy-daughter relationship and a morning in the life of a dad who has a daughter who's very picky about her hairdo. And I don't have kids of my own, but I'm sure that those of you who do, some of you have kids who are very picky about what their hair looks like. But the daddy shows patience and perseverance and love for his daughter and uses the opportunity of doing her hair as a way to foster their relationship. And it's just very beautifully done. And then One of a Kind. This one is written by author Chris Gorman, and it has bold, contrasting illustrations and text, and focuses on the themes of individualism, self-discovery, and identity. So it's about a little boy who feels like he's different from other people, but he's okay with that. He's rocking out, doing his own musical thing, and then he's able to find some friends who are like him, and they start a band together. Really neat illustrations, and I loved the concept of accepting your individuality and then finding your group. Solwi. What a lovely, lovely picture book. It's written by Lupita Nyong'o. Talks about loneliness and bullying based on the main character's skin color, and it uses a fantasy element and a mythological story in order to explore more about finding your inner beauty and that black is beautiful. Also the theme of self-love, and these illustrations are mind-blowing, just so, so gorgeous. And finally, Carmela Full of Wishes, written by author Matt De La Pena, and you may recognize that name from Matt's book Last Stop on Market Street, which won a Newbery in 2016. And this book portrays sibling dynamics in a very realistic way, and also the siblings are part of a family of migrant workers. It's very hopeful and has some Spanish language usage mixed in. I like the story because of the realism, but also the fact that in the end the siblings stick together and look out for each other. So, beautiful story. All of these picture books would work well for kids who are in kindergarten as well as first grade, but you know your child better than anyone else, so you can pick books that you know would work well for them. So now I'd like to talk to you about some picture books that portray the immigrant and refugee experience. So Stepping Stones, top left, that was written by author Margaret Reurs. It portrays unique stone art and tells the tale of the Syrian refugee crisis. And the author actually saw this stone art online, realized what the artist was depicting, and then was able to reach out to the artist and start a collaboration with him. The art, even though it's made out of stones, and that's that were taken from the beaches in Syria, and that's the medium that the author uses, but the illustrations really portray the story and the emotions very well. A neat collaboration that was able to happen there. And then The Journey. This one is by author Francesca Sanna, and it has emotive illustrations that portray the story of a refugee family. She combines fantasy elements with realistic elements, and the illustrations and the story are often chilling and haunting, but in the end it's a story of power and hope. And I really enjoyed the illustrations in that one. And then Yusra Swims. This one is by author Julie Avery, and it tells in rhyme the story of Olympic swimmer and Syrian refugee Yusra Mardini. So it's a true story, contains pictures that have muted colors, and it's a story of perseverance and hope and what Yusra was able to overcome despite coming to her country as a refugee. And then lastly, Migrant by Maxine Trottier. This book has very imaginative illustrations. They're very memorable. And it actually tells the story of seasonal laborers who are Mennonites from Mexico who come up to the U.S. every year. Themes of transience and longing for stability. So as these are all books that portray experiences, like powerful experiences and often hardship. These books I would recommend for older kids, definitely in at least elementary school. But again, read the books first and decide what would be useful for your child. And I will say that there's not a lot of graphic content, but the themes could be hard to understand for a young child. All right, and finally we'll move into talking about chapter books. So once kids get to the age where they're able to read on their own, they tend to be more receptive to the idea that we can have differences and similarities, and that differences aren't necessarily a bad thing. But it's critical at this age to continue to dispel cultural myths and stereotypes and to talk about those things as they come up. So let's talk about some cool chapter books that you could read with your child. So I think 4 of these are for kids, and then the one on the left is a young adult or new adult story. So let's start with the second one, Stella Diaz Never Gives Up by Angela Dominguez. So this is the second book in a series about Stella, and it's great for elementary school students. So Stella, the main character, becomes passionate about environmental activism after visiting the Shedd Aquarium in Chicago with her school. Stella is a relatable character, and the book features some Spanish language dialogue. So this is great for kids who are starting to read, as well as kids who are just a little bit older than that, so like ages 6 to 10. And then let's talk about Bud Not Buddy, the 4th one on your screen there. That's by Christopher Curtis. This would be a good pick for older elementary school students and middle school students. It's set, the setting is really interesting, set in Flint, Michigan during the Great Depression. Main character Bud is going on an adventure in search of his father, who he has never met, in Flint, Michigan. The tone is hopeful, and the themes explored include perseverance despite adversity. Other themes are race and the true meaning of family. And this book won the Newbery Award in 2000. And then The Mighty Miss Malone. This is also a book by Christopher Curtis. It's a middle grade novel. It features a vibrant main character named Deza, who is spunky and has a good sense of humor. Themes include job loss, moving, homelessness, and perseverance. And then we'll go back towards the middle, Harbor Me. This is an interesting middle grade novel that features a diverse group of 6th grade students who are able to come together during a specific class and share openly with each other about hardships that their families are currently facing, such as a family member being deported or incarcerated. And themes that this book explores include compassion, understanding, security, and freedom. And then the last book we'll discuss is for older teens as well as people who are just starting college. It's called By Any Means Necessary, and it's by Candace Montgomery. And it features a very unique main character, Tori. The main character is a first-generation college student who identifies as bisexual and is also Afro-Latinx. So themes explored in this book include gentrification, race, poverty, and sexuality. So I'd like to wrap up my Read Woke Reader's Advisory video on books that are great for children as well as very young children with a slide that shows you some example discussion questions that you could use when talking to your child about the book Hair Love. And then I've also given you, on the next slide, additional resources to find more books as well as resources that include ways of talking to your kids about racism and how to help your kids develop into people who are anti-racist. And so feel free to look at those. Thank you for joining me today. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions or you would like access to more resources, or even if you would like me to pull some books related to this topic for you, please contact me at the following. Thanks. Have a great day.